the 2020-2021 academic year. We're delighted that you have joined us. We want to welcome Rose and thank the Center for Disabilities for their partnership in delivering the Lunch and Learn. Just a note, if you did not know, our April Lunch and Learn was delivered by Terry Noldner, who is the assistive tech coordinator at Teachwell. And her session, Assistive Technology Tips to Level the Playing Field, may be of interest to you. And so you can find that on our website, and Tana may even drop it into the chat box at some point for us. We want to thank our presenters, Dr. Liz Hansen, who actually brought this issue to our attention and was so kind as to put up with me as we were developing this. I'm very comfortable with special ed rules and laws, but this topic has been a real learning experience for me. And I also want to thank Teresa Baldry, who I have had the pleasure to work with, who is at the Rural Institute in Montana, University of Montana. So for reference, that would be similar to our Center for Disabilities here. So she's from the UCED, the Center for Disability and Excellence in Disabilities in Montana. And Teresa is a parent, and she has lived experience with this very topic that we're talking about and has such insight to share. And then I am Lisa Sanderson with South Dakota Parent Connection, and we are supported today by Tana Baresh, who is our Lunch and Learn coordinator and is our technical assistance for the session today. So please, we invite your participation, questions, and feedback. You have the chat box, and we are happy to open the lines if you have a question. We do have limited time today, and so and this session is recorded. So if there's individual issues, we don't want any FERPA or HIPAA violations, so we can have those discussions either after the recording is done, after the session is done, or we can make an appointment to visit with you. And because we do have limited time today, in-depth discussions, we may ask to parking lot and follow up with you independently at a later time. So any questions before we get started? All right, and I am going to all right, let me try something. All right. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, it's just delayed here. All right, let me see if I can make this work. Here we go. There, all right. My system is being a little glitchy. I'm not touching anything. And Liz and Teresa, you will start us off.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate so much being able to work with this group, and I have learned a great deal. Just as Lisa said, I think when we all come together, we all have a lot to learn from each other, and so I truly appreciate it. I work in the at the University of South Dakota, Communication Sciences and Disorders. My specialty area is AAC. I studied it, have done research in the area, teach it, worked in an AAC and assistive technology clinic for several years, and safe to say that I'm pretty passionate about it. We need to set the stage, I think, clarify what we're talking about when we talk about AAC, because people sometimes have different terminology in mind. And the big picture of AAC is that it is any type of communication mode or modality, we say sometimes, that is other than our natural speech or just handwriting without any kind of modifications. People kind of get tunnel vision sometimes and think of AAC as being just that device, that, you know, really expensive multi-$1,000 device, but it's so much more than that. And it includes strategies that we can use to communicate with people and to help people communicate. Even nonverbal gestures and facial expressions are considered to be a part of AAC. So we're thinking about big picture. It seems like when we start talking about the money, you know, the funding, and we'll get into that, that's when people are really focusing on the super expensive big ticket item devices. But AAC overall supports are part of the overall communication intervention. And the basis of it is that we need to help everybody learn to value and accept all different modalities of communication, you know, and not just limit it to certain types of responses, for example. Next
And
slide.
This is my only comment that I would add in there is that an individual who may use one form of communication, such as a speech generating device, may not use that in all settings. And that if they're choosing to provide gestures or use a low-tech device, that whenever they're communicating, however they're communicating, we are valuing it equally as communication. And now I may go on. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have a lot of slides that are going to talk about the protections for students with disabilities, and those protections are robust. And we're going to start talking about the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the law, the federal law that authorizes what we call special education. IDEA says this, it says states, if you offer a free public education, you must make that equally accessible to students with disabilities at no cost to their families. So key is specially designed instruction unique to the needs of the child. FAPE, a free and appropriate public education. There again, we have the free, no cost to families. Appropriate means individualized for the student. And of course, we have public education, and that is public. IDEA does not extend to private school. IDEA does not extend to homeschool. It is public schools. And so that sometimes is a misunderstanding from both professionals and families. Now, how do we deliver this specialized instruction and accommodations, modifications, and supports? We deliver that through an individualized education program. We generally call that the IEP, the Individual Education Plan. The IEP is a legally binding document. If the services and supports are written into the IEP, then the school will be out of compliance with IDEA if they do not provide those services and supports. If it is not written into the IEP, they are not out of compliance. And so it is key that anything students need be written into the IEP to have all of the procedural safeguards, those legal protections available to both students and their parents. And those parents have the right to advocate to have their students' unique needs met. Now, there are also other protections for students with disabilities. We have Section 504 and we have Title II of the ADA, and that's a whole nother workshop. Today, we're just going to be addressing really IDEA and the IEP. So any questions on that? Whoops, I think I went too. So I want to discuss some of the requirements of IDEA, and this is a very text-heavy presentation because we want you to know the protections of IDEA for children. And so we have several places in IDEA that directly specify the supports that may be required for students with communication needs. So IDEA has consideration of special factors. Behavior is a special factor. Limited English proficiency is a factor. Students with visual impairments are special factors. And students with different communication needs are special factors that need to be addressed in special ways. We also have the special factor of assistive technology needs. And these 4 or 5 topics should be discussed every single IEP. Does this student have any of these special factors? If they do, we check the box and then we do further work after that. Now, there's something called direct instruction here. And so I am going to let Teresa, why don't you address this direct discussion, or the direct instruction, what that actually means.
I froze for a second, Lisa, so I wasn't sure if you were deferring to myself. So I'm thinking maybe you were, and I wanted to talk about direct instruction and how important modeling is. Modeling, by that I mean using assistive technology that we're expecting the child to use and showing them how to use it. So it shouldn't just be that individual is expected to do this. These children already, know how different they are. And so using assistive technology to communicate emphasizes to them again that difference. Yet if others are using it, it helps in 2 ways. One, it provides a showing of how to do this, that exposure, immersion, as Liz pointed out, of this activity being part of how you can participate in. It also helps the individuals who are having to use the AAC understand that this is a different way of thinking, how difficult this truly can be. So modeling could come from peers, classroom teachers, anyone in that child's environment to help them see that others also can use this mode of communication.
Thank you, Teresa. And we want to make clear here, communication is not just with the speech language clinician. It is also with all of the school personnel, and it is also communicating with the students' peers. These are all important considerations that we need to have. We also have IDE address specifically assistive technology. So there again, it's one of those special factors. So if it applies, check the box. Some schools will have additional forms to fill out. We also want to make sure we embed into the IEP accommodations that are needed to make sure everybody knows their role in supporting this child to be successful in the educational environment, be successful in using whatever modalities of communication they have, and who is responsible for helping in that effort. Now, AT is determined on a case-by-case individual basis, and it may be a special ed service, it may be a related service, or it may be a supplemental aid or service. When students do have assistive technology that they utilize, it is possible that that technology, that those tools can go with the student. We have to be careful because when we're talking about assistive technology, it is not always something that you plug in or has batteries. And so if they use a tool that needs to go home with them, that can be written into the IEP. Schools may access alternative ways of funding assistive technology, but they cannot delay providing it while waiting for payment for another source. And schools may also not require or compel parents to utilize their insurance or their own personal assets in order to access assistive technology for their student. Here again, we have specific language that talks about assistive technology as something that is addressed in IDEA. So again, students have robust protections to get what they need regarding their communication needs. So I'm going to move this out of the way here, or not here. And so how do we determine those needs? Those are always individual needs done through generally specific types of evaluations. If equipment is purchased by the school, there are some downsides. It does belong to the school. It may be shared by other students. Is it individualized truly to that student's unique needs is a question. And is it going to be available to students throughout all their environments during the school day? We also have to think about vacations and holidays and breaks, and then the at-home issue. A district must provide a device for use at home if it is necessary for that child to provide FAPE. And again, that will be in the IEP. And if it is purchased by the family, it belongs to the family, and it is a dedicated resource and exclusive to use by that student. Here so we were talking about AT devices, which don't necessarily have to be plug-in devices. And now we're talking about AT services. And again, you can see the robust layers of procedural safeguards that say, yes, students need these things to access that free and appropriate public education. So evaluation, acquisition, really maintaining and customizing, coordinating with other supports in the school, training and technical assistance for the child, for their family, and for those school personnel who are helping them. So everybody knows what to do and how to help this child master and be successful using whatever services and supports and modalities of communication they are accessing. We also have another section in IDEA that specifically talks about needed accommodations, modifications, and that school personnel may need supports to know how to support a child and use their AAC. They may have methods or modalities, or there may be equipment that school staff are not familiar with, they may not be comfortable with. And so there again, this is another protection. It's not enough to just have a goal. It's not enough to have a device. How do we get this into the IEP in such a way that everyone working with children are supported to help the child and school staff be successful? All right, so that was a lot of text. I just wanted to glance back. Any questions on that? And I'm not seeing my chat screen, so Tana, you'll have to let me know.
No questions so far.
Okay, all right. All right, so we're going to discuss a couple of common IEP issues. And so whether it's this issue of communication or any other issue, it's the same issue. What happens when you transfer to a new school? Well, IDEA says that the new school must still provide FAPE, that free and appropriate public education, as described in the current and active IEP. They don't get to just simply disregard it. Now, they have to provide that to the best of their ability until a new IEP is implemented, or the school conducts a new evaluation and determine that the child maybe is not eligible any longer, or the child is eligible and we have a new IEP developed and implemented. So ignoring it is not an option. They need to continue providing FAPE under the existing IEP until there is a replacement or the child is not determined eligible. Now, procedural safeguards are available to families at every single step of the way, and not just one. There are many. And so South Dakota Parent Connection Parent Centers are here to help families understand what their options are to disagree. They have the right to disagree. So let's talk a little bit special about out-of-state transfer. So again, the new school, even if it's out of state, still must implement that IEP as written to the best of their ability. And they will most certainly be conducting a new evaluation and either determine the child not eligible or determine implement a new IEP. For out-of-district transfers, so for families moving across South Dakota, expect that the new school will ask to complete an evaluation. And again, not eligible or new IEP. And then when there is an in-district transfer, so you're in the same school district but transferring schools, it's unlikely that a new evaluation will be needed, but every school district is unique and every school building in every school district is unique as well. And so just know that in all of these scenarios, they must implement the IEP as written until a new one takes its place or a child is determined not eligible. And at any step in the way, procedural safeguards are available to families to disagree and follow the process to ensure their children with disabilities receive that free and appropriate public education to which they're legally entitled. And I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to talk about this one and the next one goes to Liz, right? All right.
Yep.
So parents have the right to request an evaluation for assistive tech, for AAC, for anything else. And there's a couple ways they can do this. During an IEP meeting, family states concerns and says, I would like an evaluation. Let's write that into the IEP. And it's just not enough to say, I want an evaluation, but what kind of evaluation and what are some of the core baseline expertise, professional licensure that is required for someone to conduct a valid assessment. The IT coordinator for the school should not be doing an AT assessment, for instance, right? So the school pays. If it's in the IEP, the school pays for an evaluation. Now, another way families can get at this is to submit an old-fashioned signed, dated, a written letter of request to the school that says, I am requesting an evaluation for AT, AAC, autism, whatever you have, they have the right to do that. Again, that would be a school pays the bill for that. Now, the school will respond with a parental prior written notice, PPW, and this is an important document. Families should look for it and read it because it says, yes, we are going to conduct an evaluation. Then families need to have conversations about, okay, what do we want conducted and who should conduct it? And families should advocate that the professional level of expertise is conducting the evaluation so it is valid and it provides good information on which to build the student's IEP. Now the school can say no, and they will write why in the parental prior written notice. So again, you want to read, and they will say no because of X, Y, Z, because of these factors. Families can disagree. Those procedural safeguards. Parent Connection is here to help you understand what you do next. At Parent Connection, we always say no is just the beginning of the conversation. Now, families may, this happens often, families maybe unwittingly get an outside evaluation, or they choose to have an outside evaluation, not realizing that the school does not need to pay for that. And while the schools must consider, the IEP teams must consider that as long as those evaluation meets the school's criteria, they are not required to accept or agree or implement those recommendations. And then families pay for these independent evaluations. So just know that families have rights in this process, and that when schools are doing the evaluations, not only do they pay, but is generally a greater likelihood that they will be motivated to implement and act on those recommendations. Now, Teresa and Elizabeth, did you have anything you wanted to say or clarify about what I just said?
I think that this is one of the most important things that I've learned from our discussions in preparation for this presentation, that because I get a lot of contact from parents, especially looking for an AAC evaluation. And sometimes I hear from schools as well who are looking to get an AAC evaluation, and they're willing to look for an outside person to do it for them. I didn't realize the line that there was between whether or not the school pays for it. And I think that it's just fantastic as long as as long as parents follow the procedures, request the evaluation, put that in writing, make sure that you get a written response and proceed from there, that there is a way to work toward that external evaluation that the school then would need to pay for if you do it the right way. And also that the school does need to consider that outside input. They don't have to, if the parents just get that evaluation without talking to the school about it and, pay for it out of pocket and then present it, yeah, the team needs to look at it, but they don't have an obligation to actually implement it. So making sure that you're following procedures has really been brought home to me.
And there again, families can disagree with the school's decision not to implement. So there again, we have procedural safeguards for families. I moved this up one because we were talking about requesting an evaluation, and sometimes it's helpful to have models to follow. So these are possible samples, not that they have to be followed directly, but it gives you an idea of how specific you may wish to be. And the school still gets to decide who is doing that evaluation at the front end. But the power of parents is in asking really good questions and letting the school, making the school answer and provide documentation on how they have arrived at their decision. So what do we need to assess? Who is going to do it? What is their experience to be able to do it? What all are we looking at? What all is being assessed? And how is it going to be done? Because we want assessment done throughout the student's educational day. We want it to be functional to meet the needs of that student. And so whether it's AT or AAC or anything else, the same process applies, that parents should be involved in determining what is being evaluated and those parameters of who and how. The school is the ultimate decision maker, but that's not the end of the story because of more procedural safeguards. All right, so another one is the independent educational evaluation. Anytime a parent disagrees with a school evaluation, they can, at the school's expense, ask for an independent educational evaluation. Independent means it's not done by the school. And if they disagree, they have the right to submit a request to the school to say, we disagree and we want an independent educational evaluation, an IEE. The school has, this is a right, it's not a request the school can deny. So the school can either pay for the evaluation or they can initiate a due process hearing to show why it's not needed. But whatever they do, they have to do it without unnecessary delay, because that would be denying the child a free and appropriate public education. Parents don't have to spell out their reasons why they disagree. They don't have to prove or document anything. They just say, we disagree, we want an IEE. The parents also have the right to an IE if the school did not evaluate in an area of concern. Families said, listen, I told you at the IEP meeting, I've been asking, you're still not doing it. You didn't evaluate in my area of concern. I'm going to have a signed, written, dated request for an IEE on this topic, on this issue. Schools pay for IEEs. Again, families want to work with schools because schools may have some criteria of who can do these external evaluations. Again, families can disagree with that list and advocate for meeting their child's needs. So again, procedural safeguards, but work with the school. School, who are we allowed to use, right? Or what do I need to provide to you to have it authorized? So families don't want to submit an IEE and then go out and get it. You want to follow that process to make it valid and to make it actionable. Now, oh, excuse me. Now, this is where finally I turn over to Liz.
Right. We've had a lot of discussion about, who pays for, well, there are two questions about who pays. Who pays for the evaluation, and we addressed that with the previous slides, but then there's, if a recommendation is for a very expensive speech generating device, who pays for that? And that's a really, really touchy question. If you've been through this process, you know that it can raise a lot of hackles, and there can be a lot of miscommunication involved. So schools are required to provide funding, but not to the, they don't have to be the only funding source. So if it can be worked out, that's okay, as long as there's agreement. I did an informal survey of the folks who are a member of our AAC community of practice for South Dakota. It includes, I think, mostly people in South Dakota, but it's open to others as well. And I got some pretty consistent feedback. Most people's experience is going through South Dakota Medical Assistance or Medicaid to get funding for a child's speech generating device that is intended for school, intended to be used at school for communication as well as at home, because it is the child's property, it's the family's property at that point. So it's fine to do that, to go through Medicaid or private insurance. There are other funding sources sometimes. The telecommunication equipment distribution programs, all states have a program like this. And in South Dakota, it does include people with speech impairments. People misunderstand often, I think, that this program is only for people who are deaf and hard of hearing to get some kind of assistive technology for telephone communications. And, communications have just grown so far beyond the landline and the TTY. That there are apps that people are using for signing, and it's just really, the base has broadened a great deal. And it does include people who have speech impairments. So that's a funding source. And there's also a Family Support 360 program. A family has to be a part of that program. And in all of these situations, the communication device or speech generating device is the property of the child, the family, not the property of the school. And that does kind of take care of that argument about whether or not the device can go home with the child, or go back and forth between home and school and go home on summer breaks or holidays. Yeah, there's just no question. I think the opposite issue then that comes up is making sure that if it is something that is the family's possession, that there is language and there is agreement that it will be incorporated into the child's school day. I have heard of instances where maybe the school says, well, we don't agree that this is the right system, and so we're not going to use it. It's your personal property. You do whatever you want with it, but we're not going to incorporate this particular piece of technology. So that's where the teamwork and the upfront meetings as this process is rolling out becomes so important. You know, getting a good working relationship, even if you don't agree on every single point, there are ways to figure it out. Some other scenarios that we talked about in planning this that we all have heard about in one way or another. Sometimes, although it is in the SLP scope of practice to supply AAC services and evaluations, there's no question about that. It's in our scope of practice. However, not everybody gets the same type of basic education. Not everybody gets the same type of professional experience. Depends on where you practice. Depends on what your caseload is. So not everybody is going to be at the same level of experience. They might not have current training, but the solution for that is to seek that training through your continuing education, which we all have to get to maintain our licensure and or to maintain our certification. Another way to do it is to reach out to a mentor. I love to mentor SLPs, especially in the schools, who are trying to kind of figure out how to navigate all of this. And I'll do that. I'll talk you through it. I'll give you suggestions. I'll give you forms, procedures, and you can find other mentors, maybe within your district who can help with that as well. Another issue that kind of may go along with that is if you have other school personnel who are working with the student. So it might be the educational assistant, it might be the resource room teacher, the classroom teacher, you can name all of the different people who also are not experienced. If we expect the child to be immersed in this language environment where they are seeing the same communication modality that they are expected to be used by other people, well, then those other people have to be trained, because it does not necessarily just come naturally. So we have to consider, how are people going to be trained? And then we have the expectation that these types of supports, this aided language stimulation or language modeling, is actually applied and implemented throughout all of the situations the child is in. Oftentimes manufacturers have some training opportunities that are online that you can sign up for. If you need continuing education, they often will offer it. It's in their best interest to do so. And by and large, I have found those educational opportunities pretty good. They know what they need to do to teach this stuff. So don't discount that. Look for in-services to bring people in to provide some training. And it's not training about how to program the device. That's what people often think. And that part is really the easy part. What people really need training and support in learning to do is to, again, provide the language model and to incorporate all of those strategies and supports throughout the child's day, so that they're able to communicate and they're able to access all of their academics by participating through communication. Another issue that comes up is, and I hear this a lot, parents who just don't want to rock the boat or get on the wrong side of the educators feel that if they question something, then there will be some type of retaliation or less cooperation. You have to understand what your rights are, and they are considerable, and reach out to people who can help you with that, like people at South Dakota Parent Connection. I know we had big conversations about this when we were planning this, so I'm sure that Lisa and Teresa have more to add.
Teresa, feel free to jump in there, because I think you're coming up shortly here. And then, well, and Teresa, you can address this, because if you have anything to say and address this, because it actually will be moving right into your section next, I believe. Oh, your mute is on, Teresa.
Thanks, Lisa. I was trying to make sure things stay quiet. So the scenario on the slide here is parents concerned regarding need or appropriateness. I've got to move the head here. For evaluation for AAC is disregarded. Students are not required to, this is like, students don't have to have prerequisite skills. This is like my favorite slide in our presentation, because we often are presented as parents that if they're going to use AAC, they have to demonstrate X, Y, or Z first in order to be able to use AAC. And there isn't a list of what they have to do first. There are pieces that will help them be more successful, and a piece often referred to as feature matching. So we're looking at what are the strengths of the child, how do they communicate, what do they need so this works for them, and then matching it up with what the device offers. Another myth that is tried to address on this slide is that using AAC inhibits or that prevents a child developing language, and research does not show us that. So it's really important that we don't view this as that AAC is not viewed as a barrier to a child continuing to develop language. It's often that getting that communication experience only builds upon itself. And Liz, please add anything you wanted to add there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how Pat Miranda summed it up. You know, the only prerequisite for AAC is that the person be breathing, you know, be alive. And so if we look at communication across just, you know, the many different levels of communication that there are, there really is no bar that somebody has to reach in order to have AAC introduced. And I'm thinking about AAC in those broad terms that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. So no prerequisites.
The slide in front of you is a message from Tuttle. We now have had the IDEA and assistive technology around for a period of time, that we now have this group of young adults who have lived experience in using AAC and having access to their education. So they have things to say that's that lived experience we need to consider. And this one was really powerful to me. I don't generally read from slides, but I think you want to think for parents to consider this statement. You have a wonderful child. Yes, AAC is amazing, but what matters is your child. Love your child, play with them, support them, communicate with them, learn from them, their method of communication and otherwise. Have a relationship, value that relationship and your child as they are. Look at them as a person, a wonderful disabled person. And yes, let's figure out AAC options that seem like the best fit for them. AAC is very freeing, but AAC isn't the most important thing here. Your child is. So I greatly appreciate that from Tuttle and wanted to make sure I shared with you that message. Next slide, please. Lisa and I talked about some pieces for me to share from a parent perspective, and I'll try to get through them because I know we've got lots ahead of us yet. So one that I wanted to talk about is that communication is a reciprocal relationship. It's that give and take. It's not just labeling things or making a statement. It's all about connecting, engaging with that other person, and how powerful that is for children who are often feeling very isolated because of the barriers to their communication. So we need to really make sure that we're acknowledging and telling them, making sure that they know this is that their communication, however it was, AAC or otherwise, has been heard, and that we're creating that give and take with them, that they understand that conversation goes back and forth and is that connection. The next piece I had here was following the child's lead. AAC needs to meet the needs of the child to communicate. Sometimes we get so busy on our goals that we forget that it's not about what we want to see in the classroom. It's what does this child need to experience, want to experience, so they buy into the AAC. I often hear that the child's not buying in. Why are they not buying in? What are we talking about? Are we making sure their interests and their preferences are what they're communicating about? I have examples show and tell here on the slide because I wanted to remember to tell you about, for my son, one of his first experiences with AAC where he stepped in and said, this has to change, was show and tell as a kindergartner. His paraprofessional wanted to do the telling about what he brought. She wanted the information, and my son was to just hold the item and show it. And he said, no, I do the telling. This is my story, to share. You hold. And in reality, we could have even said, does the para need to hold this? Does a para hold this for anyone else? How could this be held in a way that is not dependent on another person? So he led that way. And I think we need to remember always, and he, very fortunately for me, has always led that way of how does my communication need to be so it matters to me. That ties into that next piece of helping your child own their technology. How is the AT or AAC customized for them? So again, this is that different piece and it's standing out as something different, but how can we make it so that it is meaningful to them? That could be silly things like decorations on the outside, but more importantly, having the content inside about them and for them and meaningful to them. How are they using that information in the device to empower themselves? How are they seeing others take action because of what they did with this device? Allowing them to make something happen in their environment, that understanding that they now have some power and control is really important. Listen to the child. If they're not wanting to use their AAC, let's find out why. Something's going on that they're putting that away. We have that happen twice in our lives where Isaac, my son, said, I'm putting this away. In 4th grade, we'd reached a point where the AAC was being used so much for the educational content. It was how he was demonstrating knowledge in reading and writing and math. He was not using it for communication. He was using it to demonstrate knowledge. And he said, I'm not bringing it anymore. I'm done. Figure out how to do this without my AAC because you don't let me talk with it. I'm not bringing it at all. You all find another way. Twice he needed to change the method for how he was being able to use his technology. Find people to help carry the load. Parents often get to be the one common person year to year for the child. So find people who are sharing your vision and have them part of your team. You're gonna need help carrying this load. For us, one of our greatest supports was our state PNA, Protection and Advocacy Organization. So once we became connected with them, they were willing to even just be on the phone at times to help remind people what our rights were within the process and the responsibilities of AT. Hope I got through those quick for you.
You did great, Teresa. All right. Any questions for Teresa here before we move on? And thanks for sharing that.
SMART goals. It's SMART is an acronym, and it is a way to remember what to include in goals and objectives. We thought it would be helpful to add this to this presentation just so that people have a reference. I think most clinicians know this stuff, but it doesn't hurt even to have just a little refresher on it. And it's certainly good for parents to understand what we're talking about if somebody says, well, is it a SMART goal? Just an acronym. The language in the goal needs to be specific, measurable, something that's achievable or attainable, relevant to the child, and it has to have timeliness. It has to be time-based. so that it's not something that just kind of goes on and on forever. So as you're reviewing the goals and objectives in an IEP, you can apply this framework and look for all of these elements. And if one of them is missing, then that should be a conversation about, well, how are you covering this aspect of what needs to be in a goal or an objective? Now, I did just a little bit of collecting of different ways of writing IEP goals and objectives. And I understand that things are going to be a little different from state to state, and that the way this is done in South Dakota has changed over the years. The main thing about it for both parents and practitioners is the language in it really has to be straightforward and understandable, so that everybody knows what it is the expectations are, what the expectations are, and how they're going to be measured, so that everybody can agree on what the outcome is. So I have here several slides that just have some examples on them, and we're not going to talk through each one. But if we could advance to the next one, a couple of things that I just want to point out, things that I like about this one and things that I don't like. Again, this is something that in this case, it was pulled from this speechandlanguagekids.com. So it's very time-based. It's, by the end of the IEP, and all we're asking, looks like it would be an early goal, identify his or her name and personal information, and it's taking place in a therapy session. That is a real beginning basic goal, because we know communication needs to occur across all settings. And so we don't want the instruction to only be in the therapy room or during the therapy session. It needs to occur throughout the child's day. But this has a nice amount of detail to help people understand, how much, for how long, and that sort of thing. The next slide is, there's a whole sequence of early communicators, communicators who are learning and then who are more advanced. And these all come from the Practical AAC website. If you're not familiar with that, check it out. It's just a tremendous resource. I use it all the time, and I direct people to it. Again, during our conversation, we were going through this and we didn't all understand all aspects of what this meant. So there's just two things that I want to point out. One thing that I would change, and that is, it's talking about the level 1 prompt. An outsider, a parent, not outsider, but somebody who's not within the educational system might not understand what level 1 means. How is that defined? So I might change this by just spelling out what a level 1 prompt is, or providing a key at the bottom that says this constitutes level 1, this is level 2, so that there's something to refer to. And then we were talking about wait time. And if you took an AAC class from me, you know about wait time, because it's probably the one thing that is emphasized most in class, that and no prerequisites. So this is not about only giving the student this amount of time to respond. It's not a latency of response kind of measure. This is a reminder saying to the SLP, to the teacher, to all of the people who are communicating with the child, this child needs to have time to process, maybe to formulate their response, maybe to coordinate their muscles to, just motorically get that response. And so wait time is about what the communication partner does to give the communicator the time that he or she needs to participate in the conversation, in the back and forth. And it's hard for us to do because we're used to filling every microsecond of time with somebody talking, somebody making noise with their mouth, with their speech. It's hard, really hard to just sit and wait expectantly. And it can seem awkward at first, but you get used to it. And so this is a nice specification right within this, this goal. And this would be one for an emergent communicator, and you can see that the what is specified is how many locations, how many symbols are on a page. It's quite specific, and we need to have that level of specificity in our written goals and objectives so that we can truly measure progress and know if progress is happening. That's all I have for these, and we don't have too much time left, actually.
So did you want to skip ahead on this one as
Yep.
well?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And so there is a handout that's already been posted up to the website, and this ECHO AAC families handout flyer is also posted to the website. These are just some supports that we have talked about here during our session today, and others that you should be aware of that are of support to you and your family. South Dakota Parent Connection is always a support. You know, we are here for you. We have a navigator program that is unique to disputes in special education. So that is Parent Connection is a support, and we have an additional support in the navigator program. And as you've learned by now, that we are here to help you understand and exercise your rights, because without understanding and exercising your rights, they are of no value to you. So we are here to help with that. South Dakota Parent Connection also has a guide, what parents should know about special education in South Dakota. That is free to families. Professionals, let us know. We'll see how we get that. And it is posted to our website as well. So you can review that document. And that has, it's a very clear, very comprehensive, easy to understand resource that really spells out all of the things that we have been talking here today. And then finally, we welcome any questions, comments, feedback. Thank you so much to Liz and Teresa. Thank you, Tana. We want to thank the Center for Disabilities for being our partner for another year. I can't even remember how many years we have been at this. You have Dr. Hansen's information here. You have my contact information. And thank you for your participation. We're going to kind of open the lines, have a conversation. And I know Tana has probably already dropped into the chat box an evaluation link for this session. And so we would ask you before you close out to finish that. It's the Survey Monkey. So as long as you open that, it should stay open for you to complete somewhere, sometime during the day. And I am going to stop sharing my screen at this point. There we go. All right, so any questions, comments? We are here for you.
I can stick around for a few more minutes if anybody would like to visit